Scituate, the third story in the Foster-Gloucester-Scituate hat trick. This, like its neighbors, has the feel of a quaint New England town. But don't let its size fool you, as the Scituate Arts Festival hosts upwards of 100,000 people annually over the Columbus Day weekend. And with just over 10,500 residents, its contributions to the history books are immense.
For me, this story was sort of an unbelievable tale. I live in the next town. I've lived there for over 20 years. My wife grew up there. I've never heard this story about the UN.
It really starts back in 41, before the Second World War, when they were trying to get the communication. And there is a location in Scituate that was used for the antennas that would intercept the submarines and the communication that was going on in Germany and so forth.
In 1940, with World War II on the horizon, the FCC sent agents on a top-secret mission to uncover sites around the country with exceptional communication reception. There, they would construct secret radio listening posts. 13 were chosen, including Chopmas Hill in Scituate. As luck would have it, Rhode Island's was the most sensitive and could detect where transmissions were beamed from in just minutes.
The Queen Mary was receiving communications from Rhode Island. Wasn't there something closer?
No, they say that this was the key communication. They picked up Rommel and other communication from Germany and they were able to decode some of it, and that's when they realized that the Germans were going to attack the Queen Mary, and they saved that ship from going down.
As the Queen Mary traveled from Rio to Australia with 14,000 troops on board, it received a communique from Scituate that would send it on another course. German spies had intercepted the ship's route and were sending U-boats to sink her, but the listening post in Scituate would play a crucial part in saving the ship and all of its passengers.
That they originally were going to set it up in Greenville. And I guess they started to, but they didn't get the communication that they wanted in Greenville. So they moved to, the gentleman that was in charge of it was from Boston. He worked for the FCC. And he looked around for locations, and that's when he was able to find the Suddard farm. And the Suddard family actually moved out of the house, rented it to the FCC from 1941 till probably 1945. And even at that time, there were a lot of people in this town, the town of Scituate, that didn't realize that this communication was going on, because my grandfather happened to work for the electric company, and they were the ones that set the poles for the antennas that went all through the woods up off of what we call Derby Road.
At the end of the war, when locations for the United Nations were being considered, Scituate, due to its outstanding performance as a communications hub, was high on the list. The Scituate Town Council offered up Chopmas Hill as a site, and a delegation from the United Nations was sent to examine it. It received exemplary scores.
They felt that there was a beautiful area because there was so much woodland and so forth, that they could put an airstrip, and that they could have the buildings that would help house the United Nations and so forth. Chopmas was too wet to get the airstrip sink. Now you got to remember that this is in 1945. It was before what we call the Route 6 bypass, so that didn't exist. All the housing up along Route 102. So it's some of that wetland that could have been one of the reasons, but I think the major reason is that Mr. Rockefeller had the money to donate some acreage in New York, and that's what caused the United Nations to go to New York.
And there would have gone the property values.
It's a nice rural town, but it could have been a whole different town if it was United Nations here.
I guess we should thank John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah, it's a two-edged sword. Rather, it would have brought a lot of revenue here, and whether that would have been good or bad, and it could have affected the reservoir, because at the time, in the 1945, when they came to look at this, the reservoir was well underway.
Why do you suspect that stories like this are not common knowledge?
Well, if you're a true swamp Yankee, we don't give out a lot of information.
But it's important that people know these things.
Oh, yeah. Well, how important it was to what they did for the war effort.
Every town seems to have a keeper of the stories, so I asked Tom how that moniker fell on his shoulders.
That's a good question. I think because I was foolish enough to say yes, maybe. I don't know. Both my grandparents were great scrapbook people. They have a lot of information through there. My mother also, and my mother was a Dexter, so I'm from the Dexter line, and my name is Angel, Thomas Angel, so the Angel line goes back all the way to Roger Williams.
So, what would you hope would be the takeaway of a story like this?
Well, first of all, I hope that there's a realization of some of the importance of this town and why it has been a town that we've had to do a lot of work to keep it as the town of Scituate. Some of this stuff wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for people that had clipped out these articles and passed these stories on. I remember those stories, and I was a kid that never took a lot of notes. I was always a great listener, so I tried to listen to these stories and clutter my head with a lot of facts that people don't always need to know.
Well, thank God you made some room in your gray matter for us all.
Yeah, you're welcome.